All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, kind of packing your leader sleigh is the theme for today, as well as those ugly sweaters, and that'll be kind of the template of our slides for the session. Some of these tools you'll know about, you may have heard about, you may be using. So some of this is a reminder, as well as a refocus on some of our key strategies and tactics around keeping our workforce, our top talent, our best employees, selecting the best, et cetera. And so we'll go over these throughout the session today. I know that a lot of you on the call are from Louisiana, and which I know that some of you aren't. And but gumbo is a special meal that we have in Louisiana. This is the kind of weather when it gets below, sometimes when it gets below 75, it becomes gumbo weather in Louisiana. And so we all make our recipes a little bit different, and so while a lot of the tools that we'll present and talk about today are very prescriptive, they're very standardized. Feel free to add something of your own into those. We all have our own recipes for gumbo, as an example, and so based on your market, based on the job, based on the individual clinic, there may be some special things that you want to add to these tools or to these tactics that we talk about to make them a little extra special. And so, as well as your leadership style and how you incorporate those into these tactics is part of the fun, and something that I think your team members will appreciate and enjoy. A lot of these tactics that we'll talk about today are linked back to what we call our TouchPoints initiative, which is in a definition the systematic way in which we want to connect with our current and future team members to make them feel valued, engaged, and committed to working with us and going above and beyond for our patients and for one another. Just a quick shout out, our graphic designer Tammy DeGeneres is who put these logos and icons together for us. She did an awesome job, and so I wanted to give her a special thanks. The yellow starred items are ones that we've already incorporated in different ways, such as town halls, team huddles, and senior leader rounding in some select markets. But we'll also present on some of these today with additional resources to further, use these tools in your daily practice as leaders. And in addition, we have the purple starred items are ones that we'll unveil for the first time, and we'll work with you in the coming weeks to fully integrate those within your leadership. And then as time goes on, we'll continue to expand and to include more touch points. Some I'm sure that you will suggest as leaders to us or to me to incorporate as part of this engagement and retention strategy. All right, so hiring the right people, finding the best fit for the job, and that goes both ways. Selection or hiring is often referred to as a dating or exercise in dating, and that goes both ways, right? You want to present your best self, and you want them to present their best selves, but you also want to probe on anything that might be red flags with them, and they should do the same, and we should help to give them a realistic preview of what it's like working in an urgent care setting for us. And so these tools are really around that. Um, the cost of turnover is moving from high to unsustainable for a growing number of companies. A lot of data shows that a poor hire can cost an organization 40 to 60% of that employee's annual salary in terms of replacing them, retraining, all of the expenses that go for that. And worse yet, first year turnover continues to far outpace overall turnover across all industry types. And so hiring well and onboarding well are two key focuses for us to get our numbers down. And these tactics are ones that we'll focus on. Premier as a whole, I wanted to share a little bit of our data on turnover. We have an 87% turnover rate in the first 90 days. Um, that doesn't mean that 87% of our team members who hire are term, but what it does mean is that we a lot of times are hiring someone and they are terming within 90 days, and we're quickly hiring someone else to replace that person, and they're also terming within 90 days. And that can really, expand and create a real problem for you in the clinics if we're constantly just refilling that same existing position over and over again every 2 to 3 months. Um, First 12 months is also too high. We're at 73% there. And then I wanted to show what it looks like amongst our group who's been with us for a year or more, 1 to 3 years. It's only at a 24% turnover rate. And it goes down from there. When you look at 4 to 5 years, 5 to 10, lower and lower turnover rates amongst those that we keep that have been with the company for at least 1 year. So that first year is we want to make it as purposeful as possible. We want to make it very standardized and planned out in terms of what we're going to work on them with over that period of time to make sure they stick with us for that first year. We've got a couple of these tools we'll share with you, and all of the tools, I'll be sharing some follow-up information, but we're all going to include this in our new Microsoft Teams site that we call Leadership Connect. It's a place where we'll serve as a repository for all of our leadership tools, best practices, reference guides, and other resource materials for you to access at any time. This is one of them. Just a reminder around how we talk about candidates. Sometimes I may have to correct a leader around them referring to a team, a candidate who's pregnant or a candidate who has a family. And really, what we want to do is with this tool is familiarize yourself with a variety of interview conversation topics and identify which topics are best to avoid, what phrasings are appropriate to use. Um, and that note that in some cases we may have other ways that we evaluate these, such as the residence or the citizenship status of team of candidates that we hire. We certainly handle that from an HR perspective. And if you are going to look at something that may overlap with a job qualification, you really want to focus on the job qualification. For example, when it comes to family status, you wouldn't want to ask if a team member has children, but you would want to ask if they have any responsibilities that conflict with them of being able to get to work on time and to meet the full-time requirements of a position with the company. Um, you know, how they respond to that is really up to them, but we're not going to specifically probe on any specific things they may have going on in their personal life. The other big tactic that we want to continue to emphasize is behavior-based interviewing. This is an interviewing strategy that is structured. It includes very specific questions that we set that we ask to all of our candidates. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example, the first and best way to ensure that we have very standard tactics to encourage or to have or facilitate a very diverse workforce is by having very standard selection assessments that we're not using sort of our capabilities around just judging a person, just using our gut reaction to a person or whether we just basically think they fit or not, right? So by using standard structured interview questions, asking them to everyone, and then using a very standard rating scale to evaluate them, we can feel very good about how objective we are in evaluating a candidate and being fair with everyone. That's a key part of making sure that we have candidates who feel that we did a good job of fairly and objectively evaluating them for potential hire or not. So this is an example of that. Really focus first on a competency. So you have a job that needs to get done. What are the key characteristics that you need in order to be successful on that job, to be the best in that job. And as an example, critical thinking might be one of those key criteria. And from there, you're going to set 1 to 2 questions that are going to probe around critical thinking. And what you're going to look for in their response is what we call the star response. The star response is making sure that the candidate, when they respond to a question that's, for example, like, tell me about a time when you identified a potential problem at work and you resolved the situation before it became serious. That question is supposed to tap into critical thinking, right? We're evaluating the candidate on critical thinking by asking them to first list some situation that occurred in their past work. For example, they may say, in my last job, the manager was rarely present at work and was not able to give us updates. And so I was more in charge of duties that had to be done on a daily basis. That's sort of the situation that you might be looking for from the candidate's response. What do the candidates specifically do? A lot of times they will refer back to things what we call the woods and the alleys. They might say things like, "Well, typically, if I got a patient complaint, I would handle it this way," or, "Well, if I got a patient complaint, I would tell them I'm so sorry, and I would, do everything that I could to make them feel better." That is where we want to refocus them on the task. Give me a specific example in which you handled a patient complaint or identified a problem that needed to be resolved. So it's getting them to focus back on a behavior, a specific example or scenario that they've experienced in their work. What specific action did they take within that particular setting, an example, and then what was the outcome or the result? If it was a patient complaint, generally you're looking for a favorable patient complaint that the patient thanked me at the end of their visit, and said that they were definitely going to come back to our clinic because of the way I handled that situation. So you want the candidate to answer all of those 4 elements whenever they're responding to your structured behavior-based questions. And then you want to use an objective rating scale. This is an example of one that we'll use in our behavior-based interviewing guides that we'll share with you. And so you're able to numerically rate every single candidate's responses, not just on the response, but what does that question and what does the response tell you about their critical thinking skills? That's really what we're trying to assess, right? Their critical thinking, not just that man, that sounded like a really good answer. It's really more focused on, did the team member demonstrate critical thinking in the way in which they shared this prior example or prior behavior that they had in a prior work example? So that is behavior-based interviewing. We can work with you on creating job-specific and clinic-specific interview guides. Our HR team will work on this with you, but it really involves 3 steps. And the first, like I said, is looking at your job and determining, what does someone need to do or need to have to be successful in the job. For example, these are some competencies that we have in an interview question bank that I have. And so one might be the way they manage relationships. And then within the competency, there are usually sets of skills such as teamwork, collaboration, interpersonal skills. And so you want to look first at, what are those competencies that they need to be successful in that job in our clinic? What are the skills specifically that they need to be successful? And then from there, we have questions that are tied to these skills and to these competencies that you can select that are meant to tap into those skills or competencies. And so for this one, as an example, I believe that the focus was on the customer focus component. And these were examples of questions that would tap into customer focus. That's probably a core competency that we'd expect everyone in the clinic to be able to develop or to share and demonstrate. And so this is the way in which we'd want to develop those interview guides with you. to be successful. We have an interview guide that we'll share with you. It's got several elements to it that I think you'll find very helpful. One is a phone screen. And so if you're going through the full cycle of evaluating a candidate to hire, you generally start with phone screening, which is going to be more basic. Are they really interested in the position? Are they a good fit? Sometimes setting up a phone screen can be helpful because it can screen out some people who don't even call you back or won't even respond. So it can hopefully save you some time of trying to invite them into the clinic when they're not going to show up there. So usually 2 to 3 touch points with a candidate really gets a better picture of how that candidate's going to behave. If they start to miss scheduled opportunities to talk with you or interview with you, those are good red flags that you may want to screen them out. We also have an in-person interview, again, based on work that I've done with managers, a set of managers to develop kind of the core competencies for a clinic team member, and then setting up these questions that are tapping into those. So you'll have that as well. We have an evaluation report that gives you the opportunity to rate them on their resume, how much experience they have, their education, training, as well as some other core competencies. How do they present themselves? How do they communicate? Job stability. Are they job hopping a lot? That's a red flag. And so this will give you a good rating scale overall on each candidate that you have. Some of these things still get missed. I know that most of you probably do a pretty good job of making sure all of the candidates know and are available to work on holidays, that we have 12-hour shifts and that they need to work on those 12-hour shifts. That goes into the evenings. They have to work on weekends. And, even a CSR may have to do certain things that they aren't used to as a non-clinical person. So can you probe on some of those things? Occupational medicine is another good thing to bring up. I think a manager had suggested that, and that's how we put it into this evaluation. But again, uh, add your own things in here as well, things that you want to ask about to make sure that every candidate is that not only are you aware of whether this candidate can meet those expectations, but it also helps the candidate themselves and whether they're aware of your expectations for scheduling and work arrangements. And then we also have a work sample assessment. We sometimes hear from managers that, they hired a nurse who can't do vitals. This work sample assessment is a good way of either having candidates talk through certain procedures that they might be expected to do. And then in some cases, they may be able to demonstrate some, certainly not the more intrusive like a suture removal, hopefully not, but you may have them take vitals on you just to make sure that as an urgent care tech, you can demonstrate that they have some competency in that before you hire them into the position. So we have that structured, and it also includes an overview of the med administration questionnaire. We do ask them these questions during the pre-hire process when they complete an application, but we have some team members who are hired as MAs and then they ultimately fail that med admin class 2 or 3 times, and we have to either demote them to an urgent care tech or they ultimately leave the company. So probing on some of these med administration questions can be very helpful in scrapping out some team members who they may have an MA, but maybe they haven't used the skills in a long time, or they're just not the right fit from an experience and competency standpoint. And then the other element of this is peer interviewing. I know it's very challenging in our clinics to incorporate our staff members within interviewing, but um, we can brainstorm around different ways in which you can get your team members involved in the selection process. It really increases ownership of the organization from the team members' perspective. It creates a sense of investment on the part of that candidate's peers, that if they had a choice or they had a say in hiring that person, that they're more likely to support that new hire's success when they had a part in recommending to hire that person. So these are some good a good overview. We do have a training program. So when you select people that you want to be on your peer interviewing team, we have a training program that I'm going to put into Litmus. And what that's going to allow us to do is when you have people who become part of that team, we can assign them the course in Litmus so that they can become, up to speed and knowledgeable about how to do some of these same practices in interviewing that we were just talking about, making sure to stick to very good structured interview questions, sticking to the script, how to score them, all of those types of things. So we'll have that training program or that online learning system available for them through Litmus. Some good checklist of items to consider when you select people to be on your peer interviewing team, or in this case, we could call it, as an example in this template, a peer champion team, a group who's invested in making sure that the clinic's culture is positive, that they're selecting people to come into that culture and be a positive steward of the culture and patient care within the clinic and the market. There's a patient champion or peer champion pledge template that I have here, but we can certainly build one in your own market that might be, something that's more specific and helpful for your group as you set this peer group that's going to help with hiring your team members to come on board with you. And then finally, the realistic job preview. This is, I, I, I'm really passionate about this. I think that this is an area where I'd like our managers to do a little bit more in making sure that we're structured in what information we give to potential team members before they start. You know, uh, the realistic component is really important here, because realistic means that, sometimes we're talking about all the great things that may be a part of working for the company. Even the schedule, flexibility we may have, the 312s, other things like that. But there are some challenges to working within an urgent care setting, and we have a structured and a standard template that you can use. We encourage what's called a job shadow, an ability to sort of tour the working environment, usually in a 30-minute to 1 hour session. And through that touring, as well as just discussion that you have with the team member or the potential team member, you want to check off on each one of these things. The everything from, hey, it's really stressful to work here. We're fast paced. Sometimes we don't have the ability to have a lunch, or we have to eat lunch in between taking care of patients, and that can be really challenging sometimes. We hear a lot of patient or team member complaints, like out on Google and Indeed, just based on lunches. It's a challenge, and so let's make sure when we have new team members coming in that they're aware that that's how we have to operate sometimes. You can also share what a typical day consists of, the technology that we use in terms of the EMR, various things like that. We have a good starting point for you here, but again, in your market and in your clinic, you can use other things that you'll find to be even more specific and more helpful in presenting that realistic preview for that candidate. And then what it does is two things. One, some candidates, and I've had this happen other places I've worked, they select out of the process. That's a good thing. I mean, that was a term. That was someone who was going to term in the first 90 days on the job, right? So if they self-select out before we hire them, that's perfect, because then we didn't have to go through all the trouble of hiring them and closing our job ad. And then 30 or 45 days later, we're back in the same situation of having that position open. Um, the other best case scenario is that it creates a sense of expectation, what to expect from the candidate when they enter the clinic, when they begin employment, of how things may be from time to time, some of the challenges of working with the company or within the clinic. And that can lead to a more positive outcome. If the team member is expecting certain things, it's more likely to be a positive way in which they can manage through that expectation, and they don't feel they were lied to or that important things were omitted when interviewing. So this is just a basic kind of to show the cycle of hiring. You're reviewing resumes, you're screening out candidates who don't fit minimum qualifications, maybe some other red flags like job hopping or long gaps in between employment. Your phone screening. We've got interview guides around both phone screening for basic qualifications and just assessing their actual interest in the position. A lot of times we get some team member or candidates who will say, actually, I'm not really interested in that job. Indeed, for example, makes it very easy to apply. Some of these candidates, when we've talked to them in HR, they're like, I don't even remember applying for your position. So sometimes that phone screen can be very helpful to, scrap out some of those people. But then you have your on-site interview, your realistic job preview can take place on the same day, or it can be an additional layer, depending on your urgency around hiring. The peer interviewing, again, similar, could be layered within the same day or an additional step. And then we go through the offer process after that. So this is the cycle for hiring, certainly additional elements that you can incorporate within that. But overall, that's our step. Any questions? I want to stop before I go into the onboarding piece. Any questions or anything that you'd like to share about awesome things that you're doing in your clinics or markets?
Is your power slide going to be available? Jared, this is Chrisanne.
Hey, Chrisanne, yes. Yeah, I'm going to share it. I'll send out a PDF of it, and then I'll also send out links whenever we've got them up on the Leadership Connect team site for everyone to access all the different tools that I talk about.
That'd be great. Thanks.
All right.
Hey,
So
Jared, that was
yeah,
some
go
great
ahead, Alicia.
information. That was some great information you went over about being upfront and honest with the candidate about what to expect in the clinic. I'm glad you mentioned about lunches. I typically don't mention that, and that's a good one to add, but I do talk about how stressful it is and that you might not always get out at 8 o'clock that night. We
That's
may
a good
have
one.
patients that walk in at 7. Yeah. So so thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I used to work at Burger King. That was my first job. And man, when they would show up at 10:58, right before we were closing, that was always just drove me nuts. Of course, it was a lot easier to get them a Whopper and get them out of the drive-through line, I'm sure, than handling a patient or two at that time, as we were trying to close the clinic. But those are good examples, and certainly whenever we work with you guys on adding things, we can then share them with other markets. And, again, it takes multiple minds to come together on some of these things. So excited to share some of those things with all of you. On onboarding, I'll go through some of these things very quickly, and a lot of these are tools that I've had from various consulting organizations, like the advisory board, mainly consults with health with hospitals and health systems, and so some of the things in our standard templates here may not apply, but some of them related to facilities. We have urgent cares in all kinds of different facilities. Some are standalone. Some do involve badging, into other areas because it's attached to another medical complex and things like that. So some of these are going to need to be tailored specific to your market or to your clinic even. But here's a few things that we want you to do to create a warm welcome for your team members. One is a checklist. What are the specific things that you need to do to get prepared for that team member so that they see their first day as purposeful? It was meaningful. We took the time to get ready for them to get to work. That's really tough, and I'll be the first to admit that even in our positions in HR, sometimes that can be really tough. Jessica does a good job of always backing me up on that, like making sure we've got, the computer set up for the team member, their office space, or we got to go buy them a plant or whatever it may be, and doing all of those things before they get there on day one. So this is that checklist, but build onto it. Another that I like to do is a welcome letter, a welcome email, or a phone call to the candidate before they start working for you. Usually the week before. So usually what happens is you make the offer and they accept, and then you put out that new hire form, and then the candidate gets to work on onboarding, and you go back to work. You've got other things to work on. But I can tell you, and research is actually showing this now. We get a lot of candidates still drop out of the process. They leave. They decide to stay with their current company. They might have gotten a counter offer with their current company, but also like, or that can be a lonely time. It could be a scary time when I'm changing from one company to the next. And so having a touch base with that team member or that future team member the week before or so, can just help to reinvigorate, re-excite them. Let them know a little bit about what to expect in their first day and their first week, all of those sorts of things. So we've got a couple of standard examples of how you might do this. Again, a lot of different formats, different ways to make it personal, but build out your own to be as successful as possible in creating that warm welcome. You can also do an email for staff introductions to all of your team, letting them know the new team member when they're starting. Another thing that we built out here with our HR business partners was a what we call a buddy assignment or a buddy commitment. Um, this can be different than like a preceptor. Preceptors are pretty focused on competency-based training and assessment. A buddy is someone who helps to connect with that new team member at a time where it can be scary and they're not committed in that first 30 to 90 days. That's why we see such high turnover, right? They're still kind of evaluating whether this is the place for them. And one of the questions, if you're familiar with Gallup is an engagement survey researcher. They do polling and stuff like that too, but they're the foremost authority on employee engagement. And they have 12 questions that are considered the top drivers of employee engagement. And one of those top 12 questions is, I have a best friend at work. And so ways that we can facilitate and connect them to our culture and to one another, to their coworkers, the better. This is an example of signing a buddy, by job, by clinic, by market, et cetera. Someone who can just be available for them to answer questions, to offer to, bring them a snack. A lot of times there's someone on your team that wants to do that. And so it's just finding that right person who's willing to do it. And again, it's an investment. It's not extra work. It's saying, you want to be staffed well too, right? You don't want to have to work the extra hours or pick up the additional shifts that you're having to do. And the best way to do that is to make sure we're retaining the new hires. We're also putting together a new hire welcome packet from Premier. We're assembling a few things right now. One is like an orientation onboarding guide that will go along with day one orientation that they do with Premier. We also are trying to put together some swag items. We have various benefit carriers like Principal and USI is our benefits broker. They shared, little nice free things with us like post-it notes and a pen and things like that. So we're putting some of these together, and then we're going to mail them out to you guys to give to team members on their first day. And then you can add in additional things that you may have as well. Maybe ask new team members what their favorite candy or candy bar is, and you include that in their bag as well. So that's the making a difference packets that we'll be including. They include like their benefits guide in there as well. So a lot of things coming there. Uh, Other things for the team member, these are kind of good items, checklists for you. Their copy of their job description, going over dress code, break policy, talking about PTO, and then what their first day is going to look like. Who are they meeting and greeting with? Who's going to help them tour? Who's giving them their badge or setting up their computer, email, etc. All of those things are just checklist items that you can build out, but we have some templates here for you. We're also working on a clinic specific orientation because, day one is Premier Health orientation for all team members. But there are additional layers, right? You want to become more specific than just the company, which is day one. There are things that they need to know specifically about the partner that you are a part of, the market that they're a part of, expectations that they have at that level, down to the specific clinic level, and then their job expectations as well. What are they, what's specific to their job that maybe isn't covered in the company orientation or when you're reviewing just how everything works at the market level. So these are the four kind of key layers that you want to make sure to cover through orientation. And we're creating this onboarding orientation checklist to help share that with you, and something that you and your site leads, your leads can go through with new team members as they come on board. And then check-ins. I've done different focus group conversations with team members, and one of the biggest things that they said in all of my experiences in doing those is that they want to hear from their manager more frequently. Again, they don't know how they're doing. They want validation. They want to know that they're doing a good job, or if there's not something that they're doing a good job on, they want to correct that as soon as possible. So these next couple of guides are really around checking in. This one for the end of the first week. How are things going? Was the best part of your day or best part of your week? What are the challenging things that you're trying to probe on, so that if there are things that are starting to get in the way, problems that might be coming up, are there ways that you can work to quickly resolve those issues for them? And then we also have a monthly check-in guide for new team members. Again, check in with them after that first week on a monthly basis for the first 90 days with these core questions. There's about 5 to 10 that you can use based on the situation. And what's good about this is you're looking for potential issues that might be a retention problem, right? If they're not fitting in, if they don't feel that their coworkers have been very helpful to them, if they don't feel that the job was what was told to them, how can you address those issues more proactively to try and get the team member back on board and keeping them in the first 90 days. We're never going to be perfect, but we can try to use these questions to help us, with addressing those issues. And so these are kind of 4 key steps that you want to emphasize: that warm welcome. How do we show that this team member coming in to join us was that we were purposeful and meaningful about the way we planned for them to join us? Emphasizing job specific, market specific, as well as the Premier wide orientation and onboarding process. Have that first week check-in and then the monthly check-ins to ensure that the team members on board to facilitate that retention and any feedback they need on things they need to get better at. So that's our roadmap to success. Anything else that you guys are doing? I know, Pam, you're doing some great things at LCMC around onboarding and orientation with a day 2 orientation that you guys do on site. Anything you want to mention around that, or anyone else have any other ideas or things that you're doing?
Yeah, so we are doing an orientation, and we do it the same week so that they also have their med admin. And we also have an epic training with our partner. So it fills up a whole week worth, and I think they feel very hands-on and that they're getting what they need. But these tools you're providing today are things that we have thought about doing, and we just haven't had the time. So they're so invaluable to us. Not invaluable, golly, that's not the word. They're very valuable to us.
Yeah.
And I am super excited that you are presenting this, because we are definitely going to put it into action and make our onboarding better.
I appreciate that. And look, again, it's all about making it your own. You know, we've had some great conversations with LCMC, our partner, as well, about some great things they're doing, and that's going to challenge us to get even better, right? So,
Yeah.
good things going on there and around the company. A couple of reminders: town halls are a good thing to encourage your team members to go to. We just had our end of the year town halls. And look, I mean, I'm open to feedback too. Like if you say, look, we get more participation if they talk more about A, B, or C. Let us know. Let us know what your team members are saying. If they say you get more participation if you had better door prizes, I think we could work on that as well. Let's see how we can incorporate some of those things. We want to set some goals for each market to have a higher percentage of our team members who are participating in those town halls. And then the same with the team huddles. We've been doing those for about a year now. Our business partners, Zachary and Kiana, put those together. They alternate every other week to put those together. But we have other leaders like Chris Sanchez and Lisa Bishop and Rachel Byers who put together different elements. Phil Rainier and his team put together the updates that go into those huddles every day or every week. You know, and look, we send it out to all team members, but it's really not meant to be like a newsletter. It's really meant to be more of a huddle, you know, something that you guys can get together and facilitate kind of a team-based discussion, add in your own updates that you want to share with your team. And so how we can continue to further that, improve it, strengthen it, that sort of thing. Let me know. But those are two reminders of just things that we're doing from a communication standpoint that we want to continue to work on and improve. This is a new one and something that we're going to be working on with you over the next few weeks. It's called what I call it are our talent ratings. We want to evaluate our team members on an ongoing basis, and we want to create this common language around what level they're at in terms of their performance. And so those three levels are going to be called top talent, solid performer, and less effective. It aligns with the way we did our performance reviews this year, but we want to do these on a quarterly basis. Like, you know, evaluate your team members every quarter quickly. It's not an extra, shouldn't take too much time, but just a classification of each team member as top talent, solid performer, less effective. Really, your top talent is the group that sets themselves apart. They are the very best contributors within the organization. They consistently perform and demonstrate values at a level that strongly differentiates themselves from all other team members that you have. So generally, we say top 20 to 25% is your top talent group. The solid performer are those that are meeting expectations. They're still a valued contributor, someone you want on your team. They perform at a level that supports patient care, patient experience, and good camaraderie with their team members. They're highly capable, high achieving performers. They're just not the ones that distinguish themselves as above and beyond with the top talent level. That's usually 60 to 75% of your team. And then the bottom 10% or so is your less effective. These are people who are consistently not meeting the big expectations of the job. They are not contributing at a level that you need them to be successful as a clinic, as a market, in terms of their attendance, but also in terms of their patient interactions. And really, overall performance here is both on the job performance. You know, how are they doing with performing the actual requirements of the job, but then also our values, you know, and it could be either one. We can have someone who really has our values, but they make too many mistakes. They are inaccurate in the way in which they handle things, or they lack competence in some specific area of the job. And then vice versa. You can have, and I hear this sometimes, this is a really good provider, but. And that but generally is what follows is part of the fact that they're not a good provider, right? Or not a good team member. If they are, you know, consistently trashing the clinic or management, are complaining in a way that creates negativity within the clinic, or they have issues with certain patients. All of those things can contribute to a team member's overall performance. And the last thing I'll say, just kind of my vision around this common language on performance is when we start talking about a team member, and pay increase, or who's your new site lead, we can start to say like, oh, this is a top talent performer. This is a solid performer. Or look, I've rated them less effective for the last 2 quarters. This is someone that I want to put on a performance improvement plan. So it'll help us to understand and help you through your framework to communicate with us, what level a team member is performing at, so that we can both be on the same page with evaluating them and what to do with them. You can have conversations with each one of them. This is kind of a conversation guide that we'll share with you on what the conversation needs to be with your top performers, how you bring them in, how you encourage them. What do they want to stay? Is it growth? Are there opportunities that you can show them new things that would help them to be interested? Your top talent are usually interested in more of some of those inherent or intrinsic motivations that might keep them working in the clinic. If they can see that they can grow, learn new skills, become a site lead, a preceptor, all of those things, that's what you want to incorporate within your high top talent conversations. Your middle performers, maybe they have a couple of things they need to work on, but it's still a re-recruit on a quarterly basis. What can we do to keep you here? And then with your low performers, what do you want to do with them? Are they on corrective action? Or or do they need to be put on a performance improvement plan? We want to get better at moving out your low performers as quick as possible, either moving them up or moving them out. That's the way that we want to do it, and we want to work with you to get those things done in a quicker fashion. So more details to come on how we're going to incorporate these quarterly ratings within your practice, but I believe it'll be a value add in terms of how we develop and evaluate our team members over time. On the other side of things, we have a corrective action form that Zachary has put together, is revised to make it a little bit easier to use. We're going to share this again through email and then put it out on the public drive for you. But it had the old one had the Social Security number still on the form. It had a lot of different performance issues, those little check boxes to check. So we simplified some of that. We also included a space where you can put the prior corrective action the team members had. If they've had a written warning or you verbally coached them on these dates, you can incorporate all of that. And then some of the actions taken included some things that weren't very really didn't apply anymore. Things like there was something that said a process improvement plan. I think that should have said performance improvement plan. So we corrected some of that wording. We also added a manager signature because you guys should be signing as well. So we did a few of those things, and we also have a fillable PDF so you can type into it. So a lot of positives there that we'll share with you. And then we have a feedback guide. This is a partnership that we did with the Louisiana Economic Development. A nice way to frame feedback that you're going to be given to a team member, really around three kind of key components. What was the behavior that you observed? Whether it be an attendance issue, you were late for work, you were rude to this patient. What specifically did you do? What's the impact of that behavior? That led to a negative patient outcome. The patient doesn't want to work with, doesn't want to come to us anymore, or your attendance issue is leading to a morale problem, or leading some of our good, hardworking team members to have to pick up extra shifts, and it's creating burnout with them. And then what the expectation is, what do I need from you moving forward in terms of your ability to get to work on time, or the specific expectations about how to handle a patient complaint. A lot of times when we're working with leaders in a performance improvement plan or a write-up, they might only refer to one or two of these things. So it can be helpful to frame the way in which you're writing up a team member, as well as the feedback verbally that you give to them. Sometimes we'll say, hey, it's expected that you get to work every day on time. Okay, that's great, but you didn't tell them, that they're not getting to work on time or how many occurrences they have. So it's a good framework. We'll share this with you as well. And go into the retention and engagement section. I know we've got just a little bit of time left, so I want to make sure to provide a couple of key reminders and a new practice that we want to put in place. Use your impressions. LCMC, I'll call up Pam again. I've seen a lot of them use impressions within Paylocity. If you need instructions, we'll share those with you. But it's a community, kind of like a positive social media, because I know most social media is not positive these days. And so find ways to provide impressions to one another. Kudos. Coworkers can do it. So we'll do some competitions or something like that to see which markets can have the most impressions. It just creates this positivity within our clinics and our workplace when we're thanking one another for the jobs they're doing. And then difference maker. If you haven't nominated a difference maker, if you feel that someone goes above and beyond, we want to make sure that you know how to do that, and that you're doing it on a regular basis, at least once a quarter, at least one team member a quarter, so that we can make sure to spread the wealth in terms of that recognition. So one of the final tactics that we'll talk about that we want to incorporate is what we call rounding. And rounding, I know you guys meet with your team members on a very regular basis, but similar to interviewing, this is a way to be more structured and probing around what that team member needs to stay with us and to be engaged in their job. We have exit interviews, and exit interviews are always going to be very negative because it's once a team member has already made the decision to leave the company, right? They're not going to be very positive at that point because they had a bunch of concerns and they don't feel like the concerns that they had or the ideas that they suggested got put into place. And so this is a structured conversation guide that you can have with your team members as managers on a monthly basis to go over 4 or 5 key questions. Shouldn't take more than about 10 minutes to talk with each one of your team members. And it's what's working well. Do you have what you need, the tools and the resources you need to do your job? Where can we improve? What are areas of suggestion that you have for us that we can make better? Do you have anyone who's helped you recently that I can recognize? That's a big one. Big thank you notes and things like that. If a new team member says that this provider really helped them, that's an opportunity to validate with that provider that they're doing a good job, right? There's some other questions that you can incorporate on a semi-regular basis. A lot of these are related back to your top talent. Hey, you have these strengths. How can we use these strengths better? What are your career goals? But really, those 4 starred questions are things that you can ask to your team members on a monthly basis. And then what you want to do with the rounding is incorporate stoplight reporting. You follow up on so many things from your team member. You fix so many things for your team members. And I'm sure sometimes you're frustrated that they don't recognize that you've done so much for them, right? This stoplight reporting is a way in which you can update them visually, either through a newsletter you send out, or we actually have a format here that you can print out and write on. Use Post-it notes, put it in your break room, update them in staff meetings around these are things that you brought up in your rounding or in staff meetings that we had that got better. We improved this process. We made this change in the EMR. We included you now in peer interviewing so that you have a say in the hiring process. So there are things like that that you can start to mark in the green category and keep updating this on a monthly basis. There are some things that may take a longer time to fix or to improve. Those would go into the yellow category. Some things they may not be able to do at this time. Maybe that's pay, but it could also be, they want some new process or change to the EMR that's not going to happen right now. What you want to do with those red items is make sure that you're letting them know why we can't do it right now. And you want to own that as much as possible. Why I want to understand why we can't do this so that I can share that with my team members. So use the rounding with the stoplight reporting. use this as an opportunity to provide status updates on a regular basis. Manage up is a key tactic that we do, where we show all the positives that we're doing, and sometimes we're going to have things that we can't get done, but we're going to own those, and we're going to say, here's why, right? We're going to explain the why behind those. So those are a lot of important things that we're going to work on. More details to come around the rounding and the stoplight reporting, because those are things that we want you to put into place going into 2024, really as your core strategy to retain your top talent, your best performers. We're also going to do an engagement survey in 2024. We want all of our team members to participate, and it gives them an opportunity to identify what are the biggest concerns or opportunities, and then for you to help to create action plans that we can follow up on with our team members throughout their time with us, and do that on a regular basis. That continuous touch point and follow up and follow through with team members is what's most important. And so we've covered those 4 areas. Look, I'm thankful for your time. I'm not a big believer in what they call time management, because I don't think that time can be managed, and time certainly can't be created, but time can be given. You've given your time to me, and I'm grateful for that. Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear from our team on how we can support you in using these tools, especially the rounding, the stoplight reporting, and those talent ratings. Those are kind of the new tactics that we're putting into place. But I appreciate your time. I hope you all have a good and happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. Any questions? I know we're right on time, so any other ideas or thoughts that you guys have that we can talk about in our last minute with us?
I have a question, Jared. And if you said it and I missed it, I'm sorry. When an employee is hired and they're in the onboarding process, but they haven't started into their job, they haven't been cleared to work. If they leave during that time, what is that? Is that counted as a term in the first 30 days?
Have they started with this in that example?
So no, they haven't been cleared to work, but they're
Yeah.
being onboarded.
So we have sometimes what are called we call them a no hire. If a team member, so if someone drops out of the process before they actually are formally cleared to work, those don't count at all against you.
Okay.
Sometimes we have someone who was cleared to work and then they don't show up on their first day. Those also we don't count against you. Because we've technically hired them, but when we term them in the system, we call it a no hire, and those are excluded when we do our turnover reporting.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions before we go? All right. I'm going to send out the recording, our PowerPoint presentation, and some additional updates around the resources that we talked about today. But again, appreciate your time, and talk soon. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, bye. Thank you.
Thank you.